right, cool. Thanks, Brett. Hi, guys. My name is Shannon Magnin. Today, I'm going to be presenting on my capstone project. I was based in Dexter, Oregon for my project, which is about 30 minutes east of Eugene. So I did relocate for my project. It sounds very convoluted and such, but it was actually a very holistic and spiritual kind of experience. But I did a lot of collaborative community assets and resource website building with Lost Valley Educational and organizers from Regenerate Willamette Valley. First and foremost, I want to start with gratitude and lead with gratitude. All of these people up here were a huge, huge part of this project. Cohort 14. I wouldn't be here without the support and the assistance and the feedback from everybody who's listed up here. So I just want to lead with that because this isn't just work that I did. This is work that other people did and investments that other people made and time that other people put into this too. So just wanted to start there. All right. Beginning with the project specific social ecological context and breaking it down a little bit. Being in Eugene, that is a part of the bioregion of Cascadia. I'll get a little bit more into that later. I was stationed and working at Lost Valley Educational Center. Lost Valley Educational Center is located in the South Willamette Valley. I'll show you guys a map generally where that is in a bit. There's a huge social consciousness in the area for regenerative work, especially among grassroots organizers. It always seemed like everybody knew somebody through the grapevine, but so you would always circulate and hear the same names of people who were doing work, especially community-based work. And Lost Valley was very plugged into that and a huge part of that as well, being an intentional community and a nonprofit. There was a big social need for tools and connective resources within the Willamette Valley, especially for collaborative work being done, storytelling and relationships being woven throughout the valley. I'll get a little bit more into this later. And the ultimate goal generally between Lost Valley and some of the other organizations that are involved was ecological and social self-resilience, self-reliance, sustainability and regenerative systems throughout the Cascadia bioregion, as well as the nested ecoregions. I know what you guys are all thinking. You're like, Shannon, what's a bioregion? Y'all are so smart. That's crazy. I'm glad you asked that question. Ha ha ha. Bioregionalism. All right. So that's kind of a framework. Bioregionalism is the act and belief of fitting human behavior to an ecological region and living within the limits of that system as people of place. An ecoregion is the different rooms within the house of the bioregion, so to speak. You can also kind of see them on maps as a series of watersheds. For this project specifically, I was in the bioregion of the Cascadia, so that's on the left. That encompasses all the way up into Canada. And then I was located within Willamette Valley, which is where a lot of that regenerative work and relationships are being done. I want to say Lost Valley is somewhere down here. And then I was located and stationed at Lost Valley Educational Center doing a work trade. So I was interning with them. I was work trading for room and board. And that's how I got plugged into the community and started learning about where there's needs. I kind of went there and I was like, I don't really know what I'm going to do. And they're like, you'll find something. And they were right. And so that's kind of the context ecologically and socially of the parameters that I was working within, especially when I first entered that system, because relocating was like a lot. All right, getting a bit into the people and the organizations. My official capstone partner is Lost Valley Educational Center. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, as well as an intentional community located in Dexter, Oregon. A few of their residents are also organizers within Regenerate Willamette Valley, which is another grassroots social organization going on within the Willamette Valley. And I'll touch base on that a little bit in a bit. My position at Lost Valley Educational Center, I was wearing a few hats and definitely overcommitted to a couple things. I was doing a permaculture internship. That was a part of my work trade situation. So I do about 4 to 5 hours of physical labor, farming, gardening, land stewardship, land tending. So I learned a lot about social forestry and other holistic forms of land management on their 87 acres in Oregon. I also signed up to do their permaculture design certification on site. So I would do about 8 hours of classroom activity every Saturday and sometimes Sundays. It was very integral and super, super important to really weaving together the work that I was doing there, my internship, as well as like some of the social work that was going on and some of the resilience building that was going on that I was doing more like remotely or online. And then Lost Valley Educational Center was also my official Capstone partner. I reached out and decided to pursue an independent Capstone project. I read about Lost Valley Educational Center in Elliot Page's autobiography, and I underlined it, and I was like, who knows, one day, maybe. And then I was looking for Capstone partners, and I remembered Lost Valley Educational Center and emailed them and applied and everything, and it worked out. So they have a huge investment in minimizing their impact on the environment through collective resource sharing and community living. There's a lot of different ways for that to look. I could get more into that, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'll just kind of move along. They nurture the relationships with surrounding communities really well. This aligns a lot with the Capstone project and the fact that I kind of ended up working with another organization as well, Regenerate Willamette Valley. They also do work parties where they work for neighborhoods, neighborhood members and stuff who sign up, who need work done, and they really share their collective capacity for physical labor and other resources or tool sharing. It's really, really cool. They have many more interests, values, and goals that I can't speak to in this time frame, but I deeply admire. Part of picking my Capstone partner is I really wanted to challenge myself on an interpersonal and spiritual level, as well as an academic side of things, because I really think that that's important to holistic conservation organization, as well as just personal fulfillment. And then some of the residents at Lost Valley were also members of Regenerate Willamette Valley. It kind of just lined up serendipitously. Is that how you say that? Serendipitous, whatever. Yeah. Some of the anyway, when I was there were some people coming through who were Regenerate Willamette Valley workers, and that's when the concept of bioregionalism and what a bioregion even was introduced to me, and I was like, holy crap, this is so cool. And everybody was really supportive, just pursuing conversations with them and seeing, you know, what needs they had and what was going on and how I could plug in a way that made sense, because I didn't want to do something or create a project that wasn't going to have an impact. That was a really big priority for me. Anyway, getting into Regenerate Willamette Valley, since they aren't my official Capstone partners and they don't have like just one specified location, I put a quote on there to best describe their organization and what they do. So Regenerate Willamette Valley is an autonomous part of a bioregional movement called Regenerate Cascadia. Our team aims to create a network of people working in their landscapes to develop resiliency and reestablish a connection to the metabolism of the earth. I think that the language choice here really shows a lot of the holistic values in this organization. And you can kind of see throughout this presentation and throughout some of these larger themes, it's a very nested structure that they focus on. That, like, you know, I was working in the South Willamette Valley, which is an ecoregion within the larger Willamette Valley, which is a part of the larger bioregional like Cascadia area. And there is like a big focus on like what that means, and focusing a lot of decision making, conservation stuff, social organizing on that local capacity to best meet people's needs. They do a lot of relationship weaving, storytelling, and regenerative project collaboration. I think an important component of this is it's not just ecological. A lot of it is social, right? So like food pantries, farming, shelters, like medical aid, a lot of stuff like that, other accessibility needs that you have on an interpersonal level. So it's not just the ecological conservation capacity when you're thinking about what a regenerative system even means. They just completed, and it's really cool, Regenerate Willamette Valley just completed a Willamette Valley listening tour. It was earlier this fall, like I think early to mid-September. I was not a part of that team, but it was a really cool project. It was financed and planned over the course of about a year, and they followed the flow of the river in the Willamette Valley and made a bunch of different stops and did different storytelling, collecting, sharing, gift giving, and we're finding out about like what people's stories were in the valley, if they were multi-generational, what their needs were, and they all came from a lot of different experiences and held different roles and hats, like living in the Willamette Valley. And so there's some more products and like connections to be made with that are coming out later that I'm not necessarily a part of, but I think it's really, really worth mentioning. And then the Willamette Valley wiki page. So eventually it became emergent that maybe where my interests lied in terms of being the generalist I am, being very broad and like wanting to make a lot of connections throughout the valley, is that there's a Willamette Valley wiki page, and the South Willamette Valley section of that was very underdeveloped. And for it to be a real resource and asset in the valley, it needed a lot more dedication and investment, but not a lot of people had the capacity to do that. With the listening tour coming up and with all of these other organizations and people having full-time jobs and full-time lives, kids or whatever, they didn't have the capacity to dedicate to a very tedious task of investing in this website, in this wiki page. The North Willamette Valley was pretty developed, but the North Willamette Valley is also like Portland, and there's a lot more resources and development up there. And so there had been that development on the website. It reflected on the website as well, but South Willamette Valley, more like where Eugene is located, Corvallis is just north of that. There's a lot more rural landscape. And so just finding where those resources and those assets were and then plugging them into the website. There has been some groundwork laid before by a previous intern of Lost Valley Educational Center. Shout out Quinn. And so plugging some of that stuff in, but also finding new ways and what it can look like on the website. And so I connected with those organizers and some of the people doing the work and created a wiki page account and kind of got a lot of autonomy. They're like, please just do something. And I was like, I got you. I can do that. So that's how I got plugged in. So some of my capstone deliverables, there's kind of two parts to this. First is the Regenerate Willamette Valley website development. This is, again, specifically the South Willamette Valley section. There's three sections. There's the North, the Central, which doesn't really exist right now, and the South. And I really built out that South Willamette Valley section. And it's what their main page is, the resource directory. So each section has a resource directory. It's split into different zones, 5 different zones, which goes from 0 through 4, which I'll elaborate on in a little bit. I wrote introductory and overviews for every category under the different sections, and I will show you what all of those were. And I also elaborated a bit on how these resources and interacting with them supports and engages with a regenerative system and what that means and what that looks like. And then further, I also built out the knowledge commons. I hear you, Shannon, what's a knowledge commons? I'm glad you asked. So there's 3 different knowledge commons on this website. The first one is the overall knowledge commons, and you can kind of think of them as a library in terms of structure and content. So there's the overall knowledge commons, and it's basically like a library of resources, information, and knowledge that's location specific specific socially and ecologically. So there is an overall knowledge commons for the entire website, which is for the entire Willamette Valley and the bioregion. I helped build that part out. So that's the only part outside of the South Willamette Valley section that I helped with. And then I also helped with this knowledge commons and that's specific to the South Willamette Valley. And so I'll get a little bit more into that as well. But here's the front page of the Regenerate Willamette Valley wiki page. You can see all the different zones on the side. And if you read the bottom, I'll read the bottom paragraph, but the organization of the zones is inspired by a permaculture technique and organized for ease of access. The community needs directory page has been organized into 5 zones, 0 through 4, beginning with philosophical alignment towards tending and stewarding the land, moving to attributes most necessary to access daily for life in the Willamette Valley, and outward towards interpersonal groups, connections, and relations. So again, taking that very holistic view, I kind of think of it as like a bullseye going out. And then all of the different zones are listed on the left with kind of their title and like what they encompass. and what those resources really look like. Cool. I wrote overviews and resource lists for over 60 different categories on the wiki page. And I also created another page for regenerative systems vocabulary and research and resources. That's because not all of this is very intuitive. When you're talking about regenerative systems building, there's a lot of jargon and different terminology, and it might be very intuitive for some people, but when you're kind of thinking about reestablishing a connection to community and rewiring a system to be regenerative and sustainable, you have to make sure that the knowledge that you're putting out there is accessible. And so some of that like thought process went into creating that regenerative systems vocabulary and resources, which is under the overall knowledge commons on the website. I included two examples of different sections underneath the directory. So there's like seeds in the North, Central, and South Willamette Valley, as well as identity-based groups. They both have some overviews on explaining how like engaging with those is important for regenerative systems. I won't go into extreme details about that, but I wanted to include that because you can see that identity-based groups and seeds are very different categories, but they both equally play a very important role in regenerative systems building, conservation work, social work. And so I think it's really interesting to see like kind of that contrast that comes into some of these groups that you wouldn't necessarily immediately affiliate with each other, but are related. Cool. So I'm not going to go through every one of these, but these are some of the groups these are all of the different groups, and I'll show examples from zone 2 and 3 as well. Zone 4 is the knowledge commons. I'm not going to include a list on that, but you can see, so every single one of these groups, like education, there's libraries, educational centers, alternative learning opportunities on the website. If you were to select any one of those categories, it'll bring you to another page with that overview and the entire list of resources that are local. Something like the seeds, I included the North, Central, and South Willamette Valley seed resources on it because there are more locations in some places, and depending on what you're looking for, there's like the way seeds, like the adaptations throughout the Willamette Valley, and there's like a lot of agricultural needs that you can go find resources in other parts of the valley. And also like driving between like the North and South Willamette Valley is like a 3 hour drive. So you could go access those resources if you needed to. But it's just like important, I think, in like those case scenarios to include resources across the valley instead of just in one section. But like you can see, like the survival zones are very variable. There's education, energy, sanitation, transportation, disability services. Something that I find really interesting is that they included fiber in this. I wasn't the founder of the organization of the website. I replicated how the North Willamette Valley directory was organized because I think the consistency is really important. And also they put a lot of forethought into how the organization is important for their needs. And since I was coming in as a visitor and somebody who's trying to serve their community, I thought it was important that I follow their guidelines on that. And so this is how I tried to integrate it in. Going into zone 2, it's more tools and resources, equipment repair, creative reuse, tool share. This is all a part of that regenerative systems building. When you think of regenerative systems too, you think of like exporting less and importing less. So using the resources that already exist in your community and in your system, sharing them, investing in them, upkeeping them, to minimize consumption, right? So it's a bit of a degrowth, anti-capitalistic a bit, if you will. And so that's all a part of this regenerative systems, right? It touches like all the different bases. And then zone 3, communities of practice, is also really, really important because you need personal fulfillment. Regenerative systems conservation work cannot negate personal well-being, sense of belonging, activist work, your rights, And so that's a huge part of this work as well. And it was really cool to see how some of those organizations kind of overlap and where they're located and what is present in the South Willamette Valley, how it might interact with components of the North Willamette Valley. So that's all a really important part of the website, and like thinking about like that holistic approach to systems building as well. The second part, which is a little less interesting, but still really important, is the interactive map data sorting. This is still ongoing, disclaimer. But I was towards the end of the internship, it was becoming necessary to start the process of creating an interactive map. It's the end product is not done yet. But the data didn't exist for what we needed to do and the kind of spatial data that we wanted to show. So I'm working with somebody who is volunteering and communicating with Regenerate Willamette Valley. She is a map expert. I have learned so much from her. And I was like, you are way out of my mapping league. But you know what I can do is the nitty gritty, horrible data sorting part. I was like, I can do that because that's just grunt work. And so she kind of helped me figure out the best layout and how that coding and such works for how it will eventually be uploaded into a program called Mapbox, which is free. You can like pay for it, but the point is that it's accessible, because this is not just the website, but also the map is a resource that's going to have to be stewarded and upkept as resources change, as businesses close, move, open, new resources, new needs become available. And so we're trying to create this, and like most importantly, with prioritizing the fact that this is accessible and adaptable. As you can see, this is not an all-inclusive list. It goes much further down. But I just wanted to include an example of what that map data sorting process kind of looks like. There's the latitude, the longitude, and the name of the organization. And some of the organizations, right, they fall into multiple categories, multiple zones. And so this is like, the next slide I'm going to show is the rest of the other side of this. We're coding for different zones as well as locations. Ultimately, the goal is to also get all of the North Willamette Valley data on here as well. So that way it's just one big interactive map that's specifically designed for the entirety of the Willamette Valley. You can see like the top one, zone 1 and zone 3 are both coded 1 for yes. So 1 means yes, 0 means no. The top one is Lost Valley Educational Center. So that's communities of practice as well as housing and survival. And so Lost Valley was the place that I was located at. And so they kind of hold multiple roles in this system, and they're not the only ones. There's other organizations that interact on multiple dimensions throughout the system. I'm really excited to see this map eventually completed, because you're going to be able to see how the presence of specific resources interacts in a spatial capacity. So how it interacts with the different watersheds, some of the conservation organizations, how it might be more or less accessible to certain neighborhoods depending on where it's located. This is all a really important component, because like you can't access the resources if they're not accessible to you, right? So Capstone results. There are a lot of results. I just gave you guys the overview of like a lot of the logistical stuff that I did. So there was an assets and resource website section that is fully developed for the Willamette Valley. There's a good foundation now for people to go off of for it to actually be edited and adapted to in the future. And it's an actual tool now, right? So people can go onto the Valley and find some needs. There was really nothing there before. And it's also a tool to help residents find the resources that they need, find, most importantly, or very importantly, redundant work that's being done in the Valley. So where you could possibly resource share with each other to minimize some of that redundant work, and instead reinvest in gaps for further needs where there might be more needs somewhere else. As well as, I already said it, but like that resource sharing component is huge when you're thinking about the tool share and that sharing capacity, especially on like a grassroots level where there's not a whole lot of funding, or where money is becoming a barrier, a financial barrier for people to engage and for resources to become available for people. During my time at Lost Valley, there was also a lot of other impacts. There were so many harvests. I got my hands deep in the dirt. It was phenomenal. There was a lot of food preservation, a lot of skills that I learned about different stewardship techniques. I learned how to use a chainsaw, which was super dope. There was a lot of relationship building too. I think that was a really important part. I don't think I could have done this project if I wasn't doing this internship with Lost Valley, because I needed to understand what values they had, their connectionships, the importance of that relationship and that reciprocity building between different communities and how they all really knew each other. I learned a lot about what community means through that, holding that role. There was a lot of art created, which I think is a very undervalued component of conservation and social work. It's deeply inspirational. It's a huge part of that storytelling component. And it really fuels you through the burnout. I met so many artists at Lost Valley, and yeah, it was probably one of the coolest parts of living there. And then finally, there were also a lot of souls fed, physically and metaphorically. The food was phenomenal. Living with the seasons and of when things were harvested, and how the preservation plays into that, and how they really curate and tend the land in order to feed the community and bring those resources and save those seeds with other organizations. There's a lot of community around that component. And people take it very seriously, and it's really, really cool. Ongoing work and organizing. So I just did a section of the work that's being done, and it doesn't even feel like the largest section of what's being done. There's still the interactive map for Willamette Valley is still in process. It's still ongoing. Once I finish the data component and helping them with that, I do want to become more involved in the community that I'm living in now and the location I'm living in now, and taking some of these resources and some of these skills and knowledge and experiences there. But that interactive map is coming. They will also be a part of the wiki page. There's more additions to be added to the website for the listening tour, potentially a map of what that looks like. There's a zine that might be coming out, and other write-ups about the experience and some of that knowledge and like relationships that were curated throughout that listening tour process, which was about 14 to 16 days, something like that. That is a huge part, and really, really interesting to look at, and how it can be replicated in other systems, which I think is one of the coolest parts of this work, is of taking it, adapting it, and potentially applying it somewhere else. It's serving as a model. And then, of course, always and consistently, for this resource and this tool to be relevant, it's going to have to continue to be added to, and adapted and edited. It's just the nature of what it is. And so I was just a component of establishing like that foundational component to the South Willamette Valley section. Project conclusions. Here's the buzzword in this program: collaboration. I learned that it's really, really built through relationships and care. That authenticity component, and having not just like a let's get down to business, I have a product, how can you help me, but more like, hey, what are you eating for dinner tonight? Can I come over and help you? Like, do you need a haircut? I got you. Like, can I help you with your yard work? It's really that component, because that also feeds you on you and community on like a super authentic and essential way, especially for community-based work. And so I learned a lot about what that means and that value that it holds. And so that's an experience I'll be taking with me everywhere. Community-based work, it feels a lot like capacity sharing, which makes it very adaptive. So dynamic. It changes a lot over time. Community-based work, you have to leave room for the fact that people have lives, people have emergencies, a lot of people have full-time jobs, and this is just something that they really care about and that they're pouring a lot into. So I feel really, really grateful that I was able to come into the system and be welcomed in, and to kind of take some of that capacity on and like some of that burden, because people like didn't have as much time for building this type of a resource and investing some of this tedious work. because they were holding a lot of other hats and like building a lot of foundational relationships, organizing the listening tour. Or they are like working at the nonprofit at Lost Valley. And so they have a ton of administrative responsibilities. And I was like, I can help. Like, so very grateful for that opportunity and that welcoming like behavior. It's just, yeah, it was humbling, and I was extremely grateful for that. And then community-based work, and the work that I was doing is extremely relationship and story-based. I think a really big component of this is that conservation work, like that story-based component, it breeds a lot of creativity, a lot of reflective components to the planning process and to like the conservation work in general, and it breeds a lot of empathy. And I think that that is all sometimes undervalued or overlooked sometimes in environmental and conservation work. It can be really easy to be like, well, this needs to get done. There's an emergency. It's climate change. Like, we're all going to die. But as soon as you introduce that story-based component, I think it really is unifying to a lot of people, and it brings a lot of things together a lot more quickly than you think it would. So it was really cool to see how that impacted the creative solutions, the creative products of some of this conservation work, like the zine and other artwork that's coming out of this. So yeah, looking backwards and forwards. So there's always more work to be done. I think that that is just the nature of conservation and social work. I just did a part of it in the timeline of like 3 to 5 months. But there's a lot of work still being done right now. There's a lot of work being done before I got there. So it's stuff to look forward to and reflect on, and use to inspire work elsewhere. I think that the work that's being done in the Pacific Northwest and the Willamette Valley is so cool and an incredible model for other locations to repeat and take on and adapt some of these methodologies and some of these formulas and things that they were trying out for different systems, to meet other needs and hear other stories and really do that bottom up growth that's going to be more long lasting and more resilient over time. I think that there is really no tending the landscape without tending human relationships. I think we hear the term stewardship a lot in application to landscapes and conservation and other organisms, but that stewardship component also really heavily relies on relationship building. So you have to steward your land, your relationship building, and that involves consistency and authenticity, both giving and receiving. And then stories and narratives have a very powerful impact. I think this summer was eye-opening for the fact that I kind of underestimated some of that capacity of what that can carry, and how far that can carry different conservation and environmental work. So definitely going to take that forward with me in work as well. My personal reflection. This was beyond just a capstone project. This summer challenged me on a mental, emotional, intellectual, and physical capacity that I've never been challenged before. Definitely got burnt out, but I learned so much by pushing my limits this summer. I'm really inspired by the work and really grateful for what I learned and the mentors that I found at Lost Valley Educational Center, and the ways that people who I've only known for a few months really helped lift me up when I was struggling a lot, and really heard me out and held me while I cried, you know? Like, I think that that's really underrated, and again, goes back to that capacity sharing. It was really, really inspirational. A lot of relationship tending with people and land together instead of looking at them separately. I was exposed to a wealth of new perspectives and resources from people all over the country who ended up at Lost Valley through whatever walks of life that they had. And for that, that's like deeply also inspirational and super valuable for bringing that into how I look at life and how I integrate becoming a person of place. I also found a new meaning to community and becoming a person of place, and what it means to be in community and live in the system that I'm in, and what that investment really gives you. And I think that like the investment is really the key term there, is like investing in your community, investing in your landscape, and making that commitment the same way you would with like a partner, like committing to the land. I learned a lot hands-on through permaculture. I also received my permaculture design certification. It was all hands-on, it was all in person, it was all at Lost Valley Educational Center. The teachers were from all over the valley. They were from all over. They've all written different books. They've all like one elder in the valley, Hazel, who like coined the term social forestry, and I got to learn about social forestry like directly from them. And so it was just incredibly cool because it's multi-generational, like multifaceted, from all over the country, from all different cultures, that was accumulating into this experience every single week. And then I would walk into the garden and onto the 87 acres the next few days, and I would integrate that knowledge and look for it in the landscape, which is an experience I'd never gotten to have before. So it was very, very cool. And I'm still working and continuing on learning from this project and integrating a lot of my experience into my current life, finding different ways to integrate ceremony into my interpersonal life, what that means to me, finding different ways to celebrate calendar events and like the changing of seasons, and prioritizing living with the land instead of against it, which can be very challenging in a Western mainstream dominated culture. So I'm still looking at integrating how to bring some of that in, since now I'm not operating in the system of Lost Valley Educational Center. Like I'm not living there anymore. And that felt very much a way of their life and the social norms there. So I'm looking forward to finding other ways to bringing that into my life. Again, I want to end with gratitude also to everybody at Lost Valley Educational Center, or who I met up in Oregon: Glenn, Brian, Andra, Alicia, Quinn, Lycan, Charlie, Olivia, Sean, Hugh, Kate, Aspen, and Kelson. Really lifted me up. I learned so much from all of them. This project wouldn't have happened without their perspectives and their input. And then also all of my external support: Alexa, my cohort, Dawson, sorry, that's cut out, Brett, Marsha, my mom and dad, Summer, Kyle, all of my Pathfinder Ranch friends, which is where I currently work, Lost Valley Educational Center, as well as Regenerate Willamette Valley, for being so welcoming and an integral part into allowing me and giving me permission to really help on something that is so important and foundational for their community. I have a couple of resources, but I'd rather leave this one up. That's it.
All right.